Jesse Knott lived a comfortable life in Portland, Oregon, surrounded by tall pine trees and morning fog. At 30 years old, he had a good job as a computer programmer at a big tech company. He lived in a nice apartment with a view of the river, spent his weekends hiking in the mountains, and met friends at local beer places. He had everything most people would want: a steady job, good pay, and an easy life. On October 15, 2005, Jesse's life changed forever. It was a regular Saturday, and he had spent the day working on computer code. That evening, he sat in his favorite chair with a beer, flipping through TV channels. He stopped when he heard the familiar music of 60 Minutes. On the screen was a young Marine whose face showed both strength and sadness. The TV story was about a 24-year-old Marine in Iraq. The camera followed him through dusty streets as he searched for his missing friend. His voice shook as he talked about his friend. They had planned to open a restaurant together after the war. As Jesse watched, tears ran down his face. His own life, which had seemed so perfect before, now felt empty compared to this Marine's deep sense of purpose and loyalty to his friend. He left his beer untouched, his mind racing with new thoughts about his future. The next morning, Jesse drove to the local military recruiting office. It was closed. It was Sunday. But he sat in his car for hours, thinking hard about what he wanted to do. He wondered if he was too old to join, if his computer skills would be useful, and if he could handle the tough training. But deep down, he knew this was what he wanted to do with his life. Jesse didn't rush into his decision. He spent weeks looking up information about different military branches. He read about what each branch did and what they required. He stayed up late reading about military history and current wars, wanting to really understand what he would be getting into. When he told people at work, they were shocked. His boss, who had just given him a promotion, thought he was joking. His parents were worried. But when Jesse explained about the Marine he'd seen on TV and why he wanted to serve, his father became quiet, seeing how serious his son was. Becoming a soldier was the hardest thing Jesse had ever done. The training pushed him harder than he thought possible. His computer skills, which he worried might not be useful, actually helped a lot. The military needed people who understood computers and technology. By 2010, after lots of hard work and training, Jesse became a sergeant in the Army. He was good at his job because he knew both technology and how to lead people. But as he got ready to go to Afghanistan, nothing could have prepared him for what would happen there. In that faraway country, where old ways of life met modern war, Sergeant Jesse Knott would find something unexpected. A friendship that would change his life forever. Life on the military base in Afghanistan was very different from home. The base was made up of simple buildings scattered across the dusty ground, surrounded by tall concrete walls and guard towers. Everything was built to be tough and practical, not pretty. The spring winds blew sand everywhere. It got into their clothes, their food, and their equipment. They couldn't escape it. At night, they would hear bombs going off in the distance and sometimes gunfire, always reminding them that they were in a war zone. One morning changed everything for Jesse Knott. He was sitting in the command center looking through important papers about military operations when he saw something that caught his eye. A cat with grey and white fur suddenly ran between the buildings. This wasn't like the other stray cats that sometimes wandered onto the base. Those cats were usually scared and ran away quickly. This cat was different. It moved like it knew exactly where it was going and wasn't afraid of anything. The other soldiers started calling the cat Ghost because it would show up out of nowhere and then disappear just as quickly. Later, Knott learned its real name was Koshka. One of their local helpers, who spoke Russian, gave the cat this name because it looked like a Russian blue cat, and Koshka means cat in Russian. The name fit perfectly. Even in the middle of a war zone, this cat walked around like it was meant to be there. Koshka soon showed everyone how helpful a cat could be on a military base. The base had a big problem with mice getting into their food storage. The mice were everywhere, eating their food and making people worried about getting sick. But wherever Koshka went, the mice disappeared. The person in charge of food supplies would laugh and say, Koshka was better at catching mice than any of their mousetraps. But what really made Knott pay attention was how smart Koshka seemed to be. The cat learned the base's daily schedule better than some new soldiers did. Every morning, when the soldiers lined up for roll call, Koshka would sit on top of a storage container and watch them. When the soldiers had meetings outside, Koshka would sit nearby, almost like a guard keeping watch. It was like having a tiny, furry soldier who had made the base its home. As time went on, though, Knott started noticing some things that made him worry about Koshka. The cat's beautiful fur wasn't looking so good anymore. One day, Knott found yellow paint all over Koshka's back because someone had been careless while painting the buildings. Another time, he found Koshka hiding under a truck, frightened and shaking because someone had tried to give the cat a haircut with scissors, leaving patches of fur missing. These things made Knott angry. Even though they were all supposed to look out for each other on the base, some people were being mean to a helpless animal. The rules about animals on the base were very clear. No pets allowed. These rules made sense because they needed to keep the base clean and safe, and they didn't want soldiers getting distracted from their important work. But throughout history, soldiers had always made friends with animals during wars. In World War I, many units had animal mascots that helped keep their spirits up. The same thing happened in Vietnam, where soldiers found comfort in taking care of dogs and cats. Knott saw something special in Koshka. The cat was just like him in many ways, far from home, learning to live in a dangerous place, trying to stay strong and keep going. Even though the rules said they couldn't have pets, Knott knew that sometimes the friendship between people and animals was too important to ignore. Like many soldiers before him, he was discovering that even in the hardest places, taking care of another living thing could help you remember your own humanity. As the days went by, Knott found himself looking forward to seeing Koshka. Whether the cat was chasing mice, watching the soldiers train, or just finding a quiet spot in the sun to sleep, it brought a bit of normal life to a place where nothing else felt normal. In a world full of sand, guns and danger, this friendly cat reminded everyone that there was still gentleness and peace to be found. One very cold morning, something happened that made Jesse Knott decide he had to help Koshka no matter what. He found the poor cat pressed up against a generator, trying to get warm. Someone had sprayed the cat with a water hose, leaving its fur wet and dripping in the cold air. Even though people had been mean to the cat, it still held its head high, like it hadn't lost its pride. Seeing the cat shivering but still so brave made something click in Knott's mind. He decided to use his military training, not for a war mission, but for a rescue mission instead. Knott's office wasn't very big. It was just an old shipping container, about the size of a small bedroom. He had metal cabinets full of papers along one wall and maps hanging on another wall. His desk sat in the corner, always covered with work papers. It wasn't much, but Knott knew he could turn this tiny space into a safe place for Koshka. Making a home for a secret cat took careful planning. Knott started coming to work really early, 45 minutes before anyone else showed up. In the quiet morning hours, he set up everything Koshka would need. He found an old ammunition box and cleaned it really well to make a litter box that could be hidden under his desk when people came by. He emptied out the bottom drawer of a filing cabinet and made it into Koshka's bedroom. He put one of his clean old uniform shirts in there to make it soft, along with padding he saved from supply packages. Getting food for Koshka was tricky because Knott couldn't just ask for cat food. That would give away their secret. So he came up with a clever plan. He started trading his desserts from the dining hall with other soldiers who worked in supply. He'd give away his chocolate bars and cookies, and in return, they'd give him cans of tuna and chicken that he could sneak back to his office for Koshka. What really surprised Knott was how smart Koshka was about keeping their secret. It was almost like the cat knew exactly when to hide and when it was safe to come out. When important officers came into the office for meetings, Koshka would stay completely quiet in the drawer bedroom, not making a single sound. As soon as the last person left and their footsteps faded away, out would come one grey paw, Then Koshka's bright green eyes would peek out to check if the coast was clear. Every morning became special for Knott. He'd get to the office just as the sun was starting to come up, turning the Afghan sky beautiful colours. Koshka would appear from wherever he'd been sleeping, stretch out long and lazy like cats do, then walk over for breakfast. While Koshka ate, Knott would clean up the litter box and put fresh water in the bowl. He'd talk quietly to the cat about what he had to do that day. These peaceful morning moments, before the base got busy with all its noise and activity, helped Knott stay calm and happy in a place that was often scary and stressful. Both Knott and Koshka started to change in good ways. The cat's fur got shiny and healthy again. He walked around more confidently, and his eyes didn't look scared anymore. For Knott, having someone to take care of made everything better. His job involved making serious decisions that could mean life or death, but taking care of Koshka was simple and pure: feed the cat, give it water, make sure it was safe and loved. This simple job brought him peace in a way he never expected. Other soldiers started to notice something was going on, but in a good way. They'd see Koshka hanging around Knott's office more and more. But instead of reporting them, these soldiers kept their secret. They understood that having something to care for, even a cat, could help a soldier stay strong in a war zone. One supply sergeant started leaving cans of tuna by Knott's door. He never said anything about it, but whenever he passed Knott on patrol, he'd give a little nod, like saying, "I understand." As summer turned to fall and the cold Afghan winter was coming, Knott and Koshka got closer and closer. They didn't know it yet, but their friendship would become even more important in the hard months ahead. Outside their little office, the war kept going on, but inside they had made their own peaceful little world. In a place filled with war and chaos, they had found something special, a friendship that made both their lives better. Winter in Afghanistan was always hard, with freezing cold days and nights that seemed to go on forever. But December 12th, 2011 would become the hardest day of all for Jesse Knott. The morning started like any other day on the base, soldiers doing their usual patrols, attending their normal meetings, following their daily routines. Then the news came that changed everything. A bomber had attacked a military truck carrying two of Knott's best friends, Michael Carter and David Rodriguez. They didn't survive. Carter and Rodriguez weren't just other soldiers to Knott. They were like brothers to him. When you serve together in a war, you become closer than regular friends. Carter was the one with the big, loud laugh that everyone could hear across the base. He loved telling jokes, even though they were usually pretty bad. When Knott first arrived at the base, feeling lost and unsure, it was Carter who helped him learn his way around and feel at home. Rodriguez was younger, only 23, but he was smart and mature for his age. Like Knott, he loved computers and technology. They would spend many evenings sitting together, talking about what they wanted to do after they finished their time in the army. Rodriguez was so excited about the motorcycle he planned to buy when he got home. He had even picked out the exact model and color. When the base commander told everyone the terrible news, the room went completely quiet. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy, like you can actually feel it pressing down on you. Knott just sat there, unable to move or think clearly. His mind kept showing him pictures of his friends. Carter sitting with him just a few days ago, drinking coffee that wasn't even hot anymore, teaching him about the local people and their customs. Rodriguez showing him pictures of that motorcycle he wanted so badly. Now these memories were all he had left of his friends. Soldiers are trained to stay strong and keep working even when terrible things happen. But sometimes the pain is too big to hold back. Knott managed to keep himself together just long enough to leave the meeting room. He walked across the base to his office like a robot, not really seeing anything around him. As soon as he got into his office and closed the door, all the sadness hit him at once like a huge wave. His legs felt weak, and he fell into his chair, his hands shaking as he held onto his desk. The room seemed to be spinning around him. All the maps on the walls and papers on his desk, things that usually meant order and control, now seemed to make fun of how messy and painful everything felt inside. That's when Koshka showed that he understood exactly what Knott needed. The cat had been sleeping in his special drawer bedroom, but something woke him up. Maybe he could feel how sad Knott was. Without waiting, Koshka came out of his drawer and walked to the desk. Then, moving carefully and gently, he jumped into Knott's lap and pressed his warm body against Knott's chest, like he was giving him a hug. This simple act of kindness from his cat friend broke down the last of Knott's walls. He started crying, and Koshka just stayed there, purring softly. The sound of the cat's purring was like a gentle reminder that Knott wasn't alone. Koshka's green eyes looked up at him with pure love. No judging, no expecting anything, just being there for his friend who was hurting. They stayed there together for hours in that small office, just a soldier and his cat friend sharing a special kind of comfort that didn't need words. Outside, the base kept running as usual, but inside those walls, something special was happening. Having Koshka there, steady and caring, helped Knott deal with his sadness without being completely overwhelmed by it. This day changed their friendship forever. What started as Knott helping a mistreated cat had grown into something much deeper. Koshka, who had lived through hard times himself on the dangerous streets of Afghanistan, had become a bright light in Knott's darkest moment. The way the cat somehow knew exactly how to comfort a hurting human showed that he was much more special than just another stray cat on the base. When evening came and Knott had to go back to work, he realized something important had changed inside him. The sadness was still there. It would stay with him for a long time. But Koshka's loving support had shown him something beautiful. Even in the saddest times, you can find comfort and friendship in surprising places. Sometimes the friend who helps you through your hardest days isn't even a person. Sometimes it's a cat who somehow knows exactly what you need. As spring came in 2012, Jesse Knott knew his time in Afghanistan was almost over. While most soldiers were excited to go home, Knott had a heavy heart. Every time he looked at Koshka sleeping peacefully in his special drawer bed, he felt a tight pain in his chest. This wasn't just any cat anymore. Koshka had been there for him through the worst days of the war. When everything around him was scary and hard, Koshka had helped him remember his kind heart and stay human. During many nights when Knott couldn't sleep, he would sit in his office watching Koshka breathe softly in and out. The thought of Koshka going back to living on the streets, where people might hurt him again, made Knott feel sick to his stomach. After seeing how loving and loyal Koshka could be, he couldn't bear the idea of abandoning him. But getting a cat out of a war zone wasn't easy at all. The army had strict rules saying no animals could travel in military vehicles, which made sense for safety, but felt so unfair in this case. Looking for other ways to transport Koshka was just as hard. The few regular transportation companies that worked in the area weren't safe to use because the Taliban had checkpoints all over the roads. Knott didn't give up, though. For weeks, he spent every free minute looking for ways to save Koshka. He contacted lots of animal rescue groups that helped soldiers bring their pets home from war zones. But everyone said the same thing. It was too dangerous, too complicated, and the base was too far away from any safe cities. Every night, Knott would come back to his office and look into Koshka's trusting green eyes. Then one day, during a regular morning meeting, something wonderful happened. An Afghan man named Hamid, who worked as a translator for the American soldiers, noticed that Knott seemed worried and distracted. Hamid had been helping the Americans for more than 5 years, translating the local language for them. After the meeting, he came up to Knott and asked about the cat he'd seen hanging around Knott's office. Knott told him the whole story, how he'd saved Koshka and how Koshka had saved him back. As Hamid listened, his face softened with understanding. "I can help you," he said quietly, making sure no one else could hear. "My family lives in Kabul, the big city. I can take him there first, then we can figure out how to get him to America." This was an incredibly brave offer. The Taliban would kill anyone they caught helping Americans, and Hamid was already in danger just for being a translator. Adding the risk of transporting a soldier's cat made it even more dangerous. At first, Knott wanted to say no. He couldn't ask Hamid to risk his life for a cat. But Hamid wouldn't take no for an answer. He told Knott about his own pet cat that he lost when the war first started. Over the next week, they made a very careful plan. They thought about everything that could possibly go wrong and made backup plans for their backup plans. Hamid would hide Koshka in a special box marked as medical supplies. They picked out the safest roads to drive on and found safe places to stop along the way. They even made up secret code words they could use to talk about how the journey was going without anyone knowing what they really meant. But they had to think about more than just getting Koshka from point A to point B. They needed to make sure he would be comfortable and safe for the long trip. Knott started training Koshka to feel comfortable in a travel carrier by putting treats inside it and leaving it in his office. The base's animal doctor helped too, giving Koshka all the shots he would need and making the special papers required for a cat to travel to another country. With each step forward, Knott felt both hopeful and worried, happy they were making progress, but scared about all the people risking themselves to help. As they worked on the plan, Knott noticed something special happening. When Hamid would come by to discuss details, Koshka would rub against his legs and purr, like he knew this man was trying to help him. Watching them together, Knott realized this rescue mission meant a lot to Hamid too. In their country that had seen so many years of war and sadness, helping to save one cat was like lighting a small candle in the darkness. It showed that even in the worst places, people could still be kind and helpful to each other, and to animals too. Each time Hamid visited, he would bring a little treat for Koshka, sometimes a bit of dried fish or a piece of chicken from his lunch. In my culture, he told Knott one day, we believe that showing kindness to animals brings blessings to your life. Maybe this is my chance to create some good in all this sadness. His words helped Knott see that saving Koshka wasn't just about one soldier and his cat. It was about holding on to hope and kindness in a place where both were hard to find. The day of separation arrived with mixed emotions. Knott prepared Koshka for the journey, carefully placing the cat in a secure carrier and providing detailed care instructions. The farewell was brief, but charged with emotion, a necessary sacrifice for the hope of reunion in safer circumstances. In the quiet of his office, Knott went through his mental checklist one final time. The detailed care instructions, written in both English and Dari, were securely fastened to the carrier. A small album of photos documented Koshka's identifying marks and typical behaviours, evidence of his identity that would be crucial for the complex international journey ahead. Small packages of his favourite food were attached, along with a tiny toy mouse that had become his constant companion during office hours. "You're going to be okay, buddy," Knott whispered as he carefully lifted Koshka into the carrier. The cat, seeming to sense the gravity of the moment, went willingly inside. Their final moments together were brief military necessity demanded it, but charged with unspoken emotion. Hamid arrived precisely on schedule, his borrowed medical supply truck idling quietly outside. The journey ahead was meticulously planned, but fraught with uncertainty. From the base, Hamid would drive through Taliban-controlled territory to reach Kabul, a treacherous 12-hour journey. Multiple checkpoints lay between them and safety, each one a potential disaster if Koshka made any sound or if the wrong person decided to inspect the cargo too closely. Knott's parents, understanding both the emotional and practical significance of the mission, had mobilized resources from half a world away. They coordinated with international animal rescue organizations, navigated the labyrinthine process of securing permits, and arranged for funds to be available at each crucial juncture of the journey. The next 72 hours were among the longest of Knott's life. Every hour without news felt like an eternity, his mind conjuring countless scenarios of what could go wrong. Finally, word came through their secure channel. Hamid and Koshka had reached Kabul safely. The first and perhaps most dangerous leg of the journey was complete. In Kabul, a new set of challenges awaited. International animal transport required an exhaustive list of documents: health certificates, proof of vaccinations, export permits, and transit authorizations. Each paper had to be perfect. One missing stamp or incorrect date could derail the entire operation. A sympathetic veterinarian worked through the night to complete the necessary examinations and paperwork. From Kabul, Koshka boarded a flight to Islamabad, Pakistan, the first time the former street cat would ever be airborne. In Islamabad, a local animal welfare organization provided temporary shelter while coordinating the next phase. The volunteers there sent Knott photos of Koshka calmly exploring his temporary quarters, seemingly unfazed by his extraordinary journey. The final leg of the journey would be the longest, from Islamabad to New York's JFK Airport, then connecting to Portland, Oregon. Airline regulations, customs requirements, and animal welfare considerations had to be perfectly aligned. Knott's mother spent hours on international calls, confirming and reconfirming every detail. After 2 weeks of anxious waiting, Koshka finally arrived in Portland. Knott's parents, who had been receiving regular updates throughout the journey, were waiting at the airport cargo terminal. They sent their son a video of the moment they opened the carrier, Koshka emerging cautiously but curious, his distinctive green eyes bright and alert despite the long journey. For the next 3 months, while Knott completed his deployment, Koshka found a temporary haven with his parents. Their daily updates became a lifeline for Knott, each photo and story helping him count down the days until their reunion. His mother particularly delighted in sharing Koshka's gradual transformation from cautious war zone survivor to pampered house cat. The day of their reunion arrived in late summer. Knott, still in his combat boots and carrying his deployment bag, barely made it through his parents' front door before Koshka appeared. The cat froze for a moment, ears forward, then launched himself across the room with a loud meow that seemed to contain 3 months' worth of conversation. That moment of recognition, of unconditional welcome, helped ease the often difficult transition from soldier to civilian that many veterans face. Today, Koshka has fully embraced his new life while retaining the remarkable character that helped him survive in Afghanistan. His Facebook page, where through photos and stories, Knott shares their continuing adventures. Koshka exploring Oregon's forests, helping with the gardening, mostly by sleeping in sunny patches, and providing comfort during thunderstorms that still sometimes trigger Knott's war memories. Their story has touched thousands, offering hope to other soldiers struggling with their own transitions. Koshka, the brave cat who once provided solace in a war zone, continues his mission of comfort and companionship, proving that some bonds truly can transcend any distance, any circumstance, and even the wounds of war.